Nobody can suspect, nobody can notice. An Airbnb gives smugglers the privacy of a garage that they can come in and out, drop illegal aliens, pick up illegal aliens. What we tell the community is that if you see something suspicious, report it.
So as U.S. troops close the border, those trying to sneak into and across America are now making some changes, with smugglers and gangs employing new tactics, not just inside the country to hide from authorities in rented Airbnbs, but also to literally hide their tracks as they ferry people across the few sections of the border not yet covered by a wall. But as you're about to see, some of these new ideas, they don't exactly work when used against the U.S. military.
These are carpet shoes. It's something that they're using once they cross illegally. Let me show you how it works. So you can see right here, there's a normal footprint, right? Pretty easy to track. When you put these carpet shoes on, pretty tough to follow that one.
These 8-wheeled armor vehicles, they are positioned to give a bird's eye view over the border. Strikers could be armed with cannons or machine guns to fight enemies. And we're told the DoD plans to add about 6 to 8 more.
It could be a house, it could be a garage, it could be a hotel room, a motel room, it could be an apartment, it could be so many different types of locations, and they will put so many people over capacity while they distribute them just like a product.
The area that we were in, we actually noticed right away clothing and personal belongings scattered along this trail. A reminder that family units and single adults from Central America continue to be smuggled through that area, agents tell us. Agents also say that it's common for migrants to leave clothing behind as they rush to avoid arrest.
So that's what they're doing, and it's a clear sign that they're trying to evade, and they're not coming in seeking asylum.
So America's once overwhelmed southern border is now practically empty. But what nobody's talking about is the smugglers and gangs who do this professionally. They're getting a lot more sophisticated to sneak people into the country and actually make it through, because their $13 billion per year migration business is in serious jeopardy now that active duty troops are deployed along the US border with sophisticated equipment designed for counterinsurgency operations, making it pretty much impossible to enter America without anyone noticing, which is why the criminals previously profiting from America's open border are now changing how they operate. Not just by masking their tracks as they walk into the country, but also by employing Airbnb to rent stash houses from unsuspecting Americans, giving them thousands of potential places to hide their clients while exploiting them along their journey through America, with many trying to make it to sanctuary cities like New York, where they think they'll be safe from ICE. But according to the border czar, ICE has plans to increase the number of agents sent to places that hide potentially dangerous federal fugitives. Which brings us to the real reason these gangs are going to such great lengths to do things differently. Their criminal operations have never faced this much opposition in America before. And with authorities using state-of-the-art tactics to track down smugglers at the border and after they get across, it's only a matter of time before those here illegally are discovered and deported, which is why many are doing bizarre things to hide in plain sight, like this.
These are carpet shoes. It's something that they're using once they cross illegally. Let me show you how it works. So you can see right here, there's a normal footprint, right? Pretty easy to track. But when you put these carpet shoes on, pretty tough to follow that one.
And as it turns out, these carpet shoes, they're part of an entire sneaking suit that these gangs use to hide their clients in the middle of the desert. However, camouflaging all of your customers before trying to sneak them into the country takes time and costs money, and it's part of the reason smuggling fees are going through the roof. Because as you're about to see, the US military has eyes and ears everywhere, on the ground, in the sky, and now also in massive tank-like Stryker combat vehicles.
These 8-wheeled armor vehicles, they are positioned to give a bird's eye view over the border.
So one of the main things that it provides is the surveillance capability with it. It can see up to 2 miles, like with the infrared. Once anything pops up, we just call Border Patrol and then they roll up on us. And also it's just, if you look at it, it's just a big deterrent.
So these massive vehicles, they're not just there to look impressive. They sure do. But they've also got infrared thermal cameras, which means night or day, they can see clearly and nobody can sneak across without being spotted. Something carpet shoes and camouflage clothing cannot stand in the way of, revealing that most of the gangs bringing people across now have to anticipate getting spotted. And these disguises they're using are designed only to mask someone's presence from boots on the ground troops who might be near them and might not have a thermal imaging device with them to be able to see at night. But even though our tanks and helicopters are part of a massive deterrent and show of force, they can't be everywhere at once. And the people sneaking across in these stealth suits, as we'll call them, to enter the country, they're doing it along areas of the border that are very hard to patrol, because what good is an Airbnb safe house if you get caught before you even make it there?
Most of them do obtain these booties from the criminal cartels in Mexico, which often comes with a camouflage kit or outfit, depending on how much they pay. Now, these individuals are subject to being prosecuted with up to 2 years imprisonment for using this tactic throughout this sector. Now,
did you hear that? These tactics must be working, because there are now greater consequences for people who are caught sneaking across using methods like this. People can get sent to prison for 2 years, and it might end up being that horrible prison in El Salvador, which is a pretty big deterrent in itself. And as you're about to see, when people sneak into the country, they can pretty much disappear and blend in, something that they're able to do by renting these various stash houses from people who don't even know about it.
Border Patrol and Texas DPS found 13 illegal immigrants being stashed in a home there. And yeah, the surprising part about all of this, it was an Airbnb rental turned stash house. So here's what we know. The property owner became pretty suspicious about this situation after noticing.
So this is a bust that happened at an Airbnb location, and the property owner, he didn't have any idea that his place was being rented by people who weren't on some vacation. And by using this type of facility to hide people, this gives these gangs a major advantage, because in the past, if they had a handful of locations that were their locations that they knew they could count on, authorities could figure out what those are and watch them and rescue people who are being snuck through the country. But now, with an app like Airbnb, there's thousands of potential places where they could go, and the place they go is always changing, which makes it very hard for law enforcement to stay ahead of them, because they don't know where they're headed until they've already left. Here you have one such facility where 77 people were discovered in 2 different stash houses in Texas. Look at this, they're cooking on a little hot plate over here. They've got boxes of eggs. These are just really crazy conditions. And obviously the advantages of an Airbnb over something like this are huge, because this place is a disaster. Because with an Airbnb, it's going to be cleaner, it's going to be better kept, and now cartels can charge higher prices to the smaller number of people they're able to sneak across the border, because the success rate of them getting to a sanctuary city eventually is going to be a lot higher.
Became pretty suspicious about this situation after noticing unusual activity and immediately contacted Homeland Security investigations. Agents got there. They found 13 migrants from Mexico and Guatemala inside of that rental, confirming the owner's worst fears. Now, the trend of...
So the owner only noticed what was going on because he must have been monitoring his property remotely, and he must have seen things happening there that didn't make sense. And what that means is these places probably get rented all the time, and you've got an absentee owner who's been on Airbnb for a while and rents things to people, and as long as it's clean when they move out, they don't even check their security footage. People are getting away with this because a lot of these properties aren't actively monitored. And imagine the challenge that this presents to law enforcement. These places are chosen at random based on what's available in the Airbnb app, where prices and availability are always changing. How do you stop this and stay ahead of it when you don't even know where the location people are headed even is? You've got to catch folks at the border, which is part of the reason why there's no such a strong deterrent down south right now. Because as you're about to see, once people get to one of these places, they're effectively able to hide in plain sight.
In these short-term rentals, it's a little bit tougher because they cycle people through more quickly. And we talked with a former special agent with Homeland Security Investigations who tells us the homeowner was generally unaware.
There's basically no way to stop this from happening. homeowners have no idea, and they can claim that they're innocent because they're just using Airbnb and they don't even know who the guests are. The guests are supposed to be vetted by Airbnb. And what is Airbnb even supposed to do? The guest is going to be somebody who looks entirely harmless, and we've actually seen people weaseling their way into properties using an innocent looking guest in places like New York. As you can see, they bring in somebody who's innocent looking, possibly a woman, somebody who doesn't have any tattoos, somebody who doesn't look like a gang member, and the place is just for them and their family. And after their family moves into the place, then other people start moving in, and then they're gonna leave, and their friend's gonna stay there for a little while, and pretty soon it becomes a gang member's hideout, which happened in New York, where you had these guys who had weapons inside that apartment and were part of that Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua. But the difference here is these gang members in New York, they were using this place as a base of criminal operations. They weren't trying to smuggle people through America, and when smugglers do get their hands on one of these places, they don't just try to live there. No, they pack it with as many people as they can.
It could be a house, it could be a garage, it could be a hotel room, a motel room, and they will put so many people over capacity of a certain location with the most egregious of circumstances.
That's crazy. So if a place has a garage and it's an enclosed garage, you could pull your vehicle into that garage, open the doors, and an unknown number of people could potentially get out and enter that property and not be seen at all by the community. But the sad reality is that if you've got an Airbnb that's run by maybe a company or one of those Airbnb empire type joints where they've got a whole bunch of listings and a few operators, they might not even care who rents it as long as they get paid and the police don't show up and nothing gets damaged. Which means there are some people out there who might see something very strange going on, yet do not say anything to authorities. And then if the police or ICE shows up and says, hey, were you harboring criminals in your Airbnb? They could just say, oh no, they were just a customer. It was this woman right here and she just rented it. I don't know what was going on.
Now, something important to note here is what is a stash house? Well, they're not isolated to the southern border. That's not the only place we're seeing them. They're littered throughout the United States because what happens is they start out crossing the border illegally. They end up being smuggled into one of these homes along the border. And then from there, until they get to their final destination, Marnie, they're moving from stash house to stash house or stash location.
Think of how this changes the game for these smuggling operations. Before, they would need their own locations, but now they could be traveling in a car, driving through multiple states, scrolling through their phone, looking for a new place to hide out. And even if criminals do get into an Airbnb in one state and the homeowner spots something and reports them, if they're only there for a day or so, that report could come in and the criminals could already be gone. They could be on to the next location. And these criminals, I am sure, when they leave these houses, they leave them spotless. They want their customer profiles on apps like Airbnb to have great ratings so that they can get more bookings. But the really frightening thing is that even though right now the border is being closed down with tanks and helicopters to stop people getting across and then disappearing into the country, there's evidence at the border right now that shows that these gangs are still making untold amounts of money.
So now what stood out the most was the hundreds of discarded bracelets littered all over the ground. Border Patrol agents tell us that these bracelets are not just random trash, they are a form of control. Cartels use these bracelets to track and manage migrants throughout their journey.
Let me lowball here and say that the illegal alien wearing this wristband paid $1,000 to cross the Rio Grande. And I'm going pretty low here. This just shows you how much money the cartels make off of human smuggling.
This is crazy. Look, you can see them in the background here. There's millions of these things all over the ground. And what the cartels use these for is to identify who's already paid them for passage to a various location. That's why you have different colors. Obviously, people are going to remove these things from their wrists before coming across the country. They don't want to identify themselves as someone who's been trafficked into America. They want to just look like a normal person and try to blend in. But look at this. The Border Patrol agent who was interviewed, they were definitely lowballing on the price. Some people are now paid $18,000. Encounters are now way down at the border, but what these smugglers now do is they say, hey, we've got this luxury experience where we'll sneak you in and we'll give you a sneaking suit and we'll put you up in a bunch of fancy places. And if each bracelet found on the ground here represents one or more individuals who snuck into the country illegally, it reveals our border crisis likely won't be over until there's a complete wall across the border, or until there are real consequences for those who get caught.
He says the consequences are helping, which includes when someone is caught, they aren't just set back right across the border where they can relink with the same so-called plaza boss, where historically they pay them one time and they attempt to cross 3 times. Instead, they're sent hundreds of miles away. Take a listen.
So look at that. In the past, people would get caught and they would just get immediately turned around, and then they would just try again at another point in the border that might be lightly guarded or at a different time of day. They would pay these gangs and they would get 3 different attempts to sneak across. But that's not what happens anymore. Now, people get caught and they get sent very far away. Their journey essentially starts all over. Now, let's just say, for example, somebody is from Venezuela and they leave that country. Well, they've got to make their way through Colombia, through Panama, through Costa Rica, Nicaragua, all of these other countries, and then all of the way through Mexico just to get up to where the border is. They're going to encounter a multitude of different gangs along the way, and they're going to have to pay each of them. The financial disincentive to getting sent, not just across the border here, but all the way back to where you started, that's crazy. People cannot afford unlimited attempts of that, and they don't get to try 3 times and then pay again and then get to try 3 more times. No, this is really gonna work. And this whole story reveals that what you have to take out of the incentive for illegal immigration is money. You've got to get rid of it. Then these gangs and criminals will not be empowered. They will not have the resources to keep trying to test our border and test our troops. And they won't be able to use that money to come into America and rent stash houses from people who have no idea that they are unknowingly being sucked into a criminal enterprise. What do you think about all of this? What do you think about renting Airbnbs and sneaking across the border? Will we ever be able to completely close it down? Let me know. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.